COVID-19. Interministerial and multi-sectoral committees set up response mechanisms to deal with global scourge.
Vice President Oshibajo calls for proactive measures to curb proliferation of small arms and light weapons.
Supreme Court to resume hearing of former Imo State Governor's application for judgment review today.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss how to end Amajiri on the streets.
Now, the issue of Almajiri on the streets has again been in the public discourse in recent times, especially with the heightened security challenges in the country.
There's no doubt about that, Kirian. Now, the involvement of some young persons in criminal activities such as kidnapping and Boko Haram recruits, among others, has led analysts to conclude that, in a sense, part of the Almajiri system is to blame.
And in recent years, the Almajiri system throws the pupils into the streets, begging for arms to feed themselves in most parts of northern Nigeria, thereby making them to be ready tools for recruitment for various acts, both legal and illegal.
Well, as the situation continues to pose concern to all, governments at all levels, federal, states in particular, have also been taking measures to deal with the problem of the Almajiri, especially those who roam the streets begging for arms. And part of what we saw some years ago was the attempt to build and integrate the Almajiri school system into the formal education system.
But with the increase in the number of street beggars arising from the Almajiri system of education, some state governments in the northern part of the country are devising new strategies to solve the problem before it gets out of hand.
Well, amongst those states are Kano, Kaduna, Katsina and Sokoto, which of course, as you just indicated, Kirian, are putting measures in place to ensure that the problem is contained.
In Kano State, for instance, Governor Abdullahi Umar Ganduje has constituted a technical committee to remodel the Almajiri system of education in the state as a way of solving the problem of children roaming the streets and begging for arms.
That's right. Now, that was the first step taken by the Kano State government. But now that the free and compulsory primary and secondary education program is in force in Kano State, now the Quranic schools are expected to be integrated into the mainstream government-controlled institutions, hence the ban on street begging by Almajiris.
Well, Kingsley, Kano is not the only state that took bold step to end the Almajiri begging on the streets. Kaduna, for instance, too, has been doing a lot with the promulgation of a law on street begging a few years ago.
Now, aside from those ones, Kano, and the others that we mentioned, Katsina and Sokoto too are making efforts to get the Almajiri off the streets. But why is it such an apparently Herculean task to take the Almajiris from the streets? We also had in recent weeks the exhortation by the Emir of Kano, Sanusi II, with regard to what needs to be done to reform the Almajiri system. But what models or policies are best suited to end the unwholesome aspects of the Almajiri system, in particular, allowing the students or the pupils to roam the streets in rags, panhandling as it were? And what kind of synergy will be required of the northern states and their governors, plus other tiers of government, to address the Almajiri problem? Now, these are some of the questions we shall intend to pose to our guests as we discuss how to get the Almajiri off the streets in Nigeria. It's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Kirian Umayo, welcoming you to today's edition of the program. We shall also bring you, as usual, our companion segments, which will include the newspaper review, business and others, and the course of this package. But first, let's take the highlights of the morning news with Nolene Ebel Ame. Good morning, Nolene.
Good morning, Kirian and Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the morning news. The confirmation of the first case of coronavirus disease COVID-19 in Nigeria has led to the reconvening of the interministerial and multi-sectoral meeting on preparedness and response to the global scourge. Following the evaluation of issues revolving around Nigeria's efforts at protecting citizens from the disease, there was a renewed impetus and resolve by key players to synergize towards optimal action on the preparedness, response and containment of the disease in the country.
Strengthening measures to ensure that an outbreak in Nigeria is controlled and contained.
For the port health, I think there's a need to see synchronization or harmonization of the information from those who enter the country vis-a-vis the data that is being collected by NCDC.
Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed has again assured Nigerians that information dissemination platforms under his ministry have the capacity to sensitize the populace about the ongoing campaign to ensure that Nigerians live well in the face of the current COVID-19 pandemic.
While we have control of our FRCM platform, we don't have control of the state's platforms. And the state platforms are probably even much more important for this kind of advocacy than the federal government platform. So please, we appeal to all state governments that this is not political. This is about Nigeria.
We have the platforms, we have the units, we are ready, and once we have the contents, you can leave the rest to us. We can assure you that the information will get to the right corners.
Away from health to security now, following the directive of President Muhammadu Buhari at the last meeting of the National Security Council for a review of the report of the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo chaired the inaugural meeting of the review panel. He called for the development of a specific line of action to address the problems of small and light weapons in the country. The presidency has expressed deep sadness and regret over the latest bandits' attack in Kaduna State that killed several people and left many injured. In a statement by the Senior Special Assistant to the President, Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu says, it is obvious that the bandits are unleashing their fury and frustration on innocent people because of the ongoing military and police offensive against them in the burning Gwari and Kaduru forest. This administration, he stated, would not be blackmailed by criminals to abandon the current military operations against them. President Buhari, however, assures the people of Kaduna State and other parts of the country that this government will continue to deploy all available resources to fight the cold-hearted bandits with a view to bringing them to their knees. To judiciary now, Supreme Court to resume hearing on the application filed by the former governor of Imo State, Emeka Ihedioha of People's Democratic Party, seeking a review of the February 13 judgment of the Apex Court, which removed him from office. This followed a request for adjournment by counsel to Ihedioha, Kanu Agabi's SAN, to enable him respond to a motion served on him yesterday morning while in court by the respondent.
Those of them who are not ready to cooperate with us, we will withdraw their names from the case.
It was for this same reason that this case was adjourned 2 weeks ago, or more than 2 weeks ago. I thought by today they would have put their house in order.
The federal government has expressed concern over the persistent hike in the price of homegrown rice. To this end, key players in the industry have been tasked to look inward and check the trend in the best interest of the nation. The Minister of Agriculture, Mohammed Sani Nanono, said this when he met with rice millers in Kano.
Investigation, the cost of penny rice per bag is about 8,500. But the mill price at the retail level is 17,000. And that is outrageous and unpatriotic.
Nigeria is the #1 in open defecation in the world, and to turn the tide now, the Ministry of Water Resources requires more purposeful collection action. That is why the Minister Suleiman Adamu wants the media to take ownership of the implementation of the water, sanitation and hygiene wash as he met with news executives in the electronic media in Abuja.
All stakeholders is required to ensure that Nigeria attains open defecation-free status by the target year of 2025, and that we're able to achieve sustainable goals, target 6, for water, sanitation and hygiene, with leaving no one behind by the year 2030.
That's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria.
Now it's time for our business package. The Nigerian stock markets braced for massive sell-off this week. Ronami Eginari tells us more.
In the wake of the coronavirus announcement on Friday, the 28th of February, operators in the capital markets have said that we may experience more massive sell-offs this week if the federal government does not respond to the COVID-19 threat in a timely and efficient manner. Managing Director and CEO of Apt Securities and Funds said that the losses recorded on Friday were not surprising, as similar losses were recorded in China at the start of the epidemic. However, if there is a positive announcement about the level of intervention by the federal government, markets will begin to normalize. Analysis of the week's trades show that the banking sector was the worst hit with an 11.8% decline, followed by the insurance sector with an 8.2% decline. The oil and gas sector went down 2.1%, while industrial goods emerged as the sole survivor with a 1.1% gain. On the global markets, investors were encouraged by statements from the Bank of Japan and the Bank of England, both respectively promising to monitor markets closely and protect monetary security. The S&P 500 climbed in early trading on Monday morning, and European shares fluctuated between gains and losses. Oil prices also rose on Monday, reversing last week's decline as confidence grew that the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and Russia would agree to cut in production this week. COVID-19, now detected in 61 countries, has squeezed businesses across the globe, forcing companies to readjust their annual profit expectations and economists to lower their forecasts for global growth. The two leading palm oil producing companies quoted on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Okomu Oil Palm PLC and Presco PLC, recorded a revenue decline in the year ended December 31st, 2019. Last year, in an effort to boost local production of various items, the federal government closed the land borders and included palm kernel, palm oil products, and vegetable oils on the list of items banned from accessing forex for importation. The federal government subsequently disbursed about 30 billion naira to local palm oil producers to help boost operations. The CEO of Okomu Oil Palm PLC, Graham Heffer, disclosed that palm oil companies benefited from the border closure, but the fall in the global palm oil market between quarter 3 of 2019 and quarter 4 resulted in the revenue decline. He further added that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement could make things worse if measures are not put in place to ensure smooth trade within the continent. The federal government has been urged to review Nigeria's trade policy if the gains and objectives of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement must be achieved. According to the Professor of International Economic Relations at Covenant University, Professor Jonathan Adeyemi Aremu, Nigeria's trade policy is outdated and not globally compliant. Now let's go to the floor of the stock exchange to see how the market fared on Monday, 2nd of March 2020. With business news, I'm Ronami Agirani.
Many thanks, Ronami, for the business package. Next for us is a review of some of the papers we have this morning.
Time to welcome Bayo Atayabi, our newspaper reviewer. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kid. Good morning. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Yeah. Okay. We have about three newspapers to
just
review.
3 newspapers that we have.
Yes, let's begin with the Punch newspaper. The Punch newspaper, above the nameplate of the Punch, Nigeria needs 9,300 weather stations, has 54. That's according to NIMET. It's on page 38. Below that, North Central won't form joint security outfit, says Nasarawa State Governor. The story is captured on page 21. Power distributors' revenue collection rises to 473 billion naira. It's on page 30. And then Kaduna massacre, we won't negotiate with bandits, says El-Rufai. That's the governor of Kaduna State. The story is on page 26. And just directly below that, sacked Bayelsa deputy governor-elect wants to commit suicide, says Silva. Page 12 is where you get details of that story. Then, falling interest rates make commercial papers Eurobond attractive, according to experts. It's on page 27. Now, the lead story, Punch newspaper this morning, is on coronavirus. Government faces difficulties tracing Italian co-passengers. That's on page 2. With 2 riders, passengers on same flight with index case gave non-functional phone numbers. Federal government orders Turkish Airlines to replace crew members under observation. All right, now, just below the photo story on the Punch, we have some stories there. Lalong Jang eulogized Longjam during senator's burial. It's on page 21. Supreme Court readjourns Zamfara Imo's post judgment review. It's on page 26. FCT begins clampdown on commercial motorcyclists. That's on page 12. Now, at the bottom, Diri visits Abeokuta, meets Obasanjo behind closed doors. Page 12 is where you get the story. And then hoodlums vandalize cars, steal parts in Lagos community. Pages 4 and 5. And then we are helpless over influx of herdsmen into Benue State, according to the governor of the state, or Tom. The story is on page 44.
All right, let's take a look also at the Nation newspaper. The Nation newspaper, above the name flag, says INEC proposes 34 changes to Electoral Act. INEC proposes 34 changes to Electoral Act. Lawmakers for retreat, that's the rider to that. Benue herdsmen grazing with sophisticated weapons. Benue herdsmen grazing with sophisticated weapons. That's page 42. Buhari, Tinubu, and Abiodun greet Adeboye at 78. And below the nameplate, Nasarawa to upgrade facilities with 1 billion naira. That's on page 42. Then Kaduna villagers to Buhari, save us. We counted 51 bodies. El-Rufai promises death for bandits. And presidency, government will sustain offensive against bandits. That story is on the front page with a continuation on page 7. Now, you see the photograph there on the front page of the Nation newspaper. The caption is "No risks." Commuters on a train in Milan, Italy, cover up completely over fear of the coronavirus. That's in Milan, Italy. The late story, of course, is still on the coronavirus. COVID-19, 158 aboard plane with Italian can't be traced. Sanwo-Olu raises the alarm. Lagos schools for hand washing. New cases in Egypt and Algeria. And the last rider, we have discovered its cure. And then at the foot of the front page, it says, sacked Bayelsa APC running mate close to suicide. That's page 41. And 12.5 billion naira for Gombe irrigation. Details on page 42.
Well, let's start with Governor Nasir El-Rufai. He visited the villages of Kirawa, Zariawa, Hashimawa, and Wazata, and all of them in Gabi local government area, where bandits had attacked and killed as many as, some record 50, some say 51 persons. Governor Nasir El-Rufai asserted that there will be no negotiations with bandits in Kaduna State. He declares, while on the condolence visit to the people, that we don't give them amnesty. We don't negotiate with them. These bandits should be declared an insurgency and fought like Boko Haram. We are hoping that this banditry will end because the security agencies are now taking the war to the bandits. Governor El-Rufai also advocated for the security of the people, particularly to have confidence and give information to security people who are doing all they can to decimate the insurgents. In fact, there are indications that immediately after the attack, they were followed up and many of the bandits who were involved in that attack had been neutralized. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari, in a statement by Garba Shehu, has condoled the people of Kaduna State, especially Igabi local government area, and he has also vowed that they will sustain the ongoing military operations in that state. Apparently, the sudden attack on those villages is a consequence of the military operations in Berenengwari area as well as Kaduru Forest, where the bandits had been lurking. They are now taking vengeance on the people in those areas. Meanwhile, the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum, Mr. Timipre Silva, says that the former deputy governor-elect of Bayelsa State is very close to suicide. And Mr. Timipre says that someone said you forge your certificate and you have built all your life with integrity, and someone all of a sudden brings everything down that can lead to suicide. If you have a case in court challenging the authenticity of the certificate and a candidate that is different. But if you say it is a forgery and you have not heard from the person, then that is difficult and cannot be, it's a fact that has not been established. I think in law they say that whoever asserts must prove. There was an indication of forgery, which is a crime, but apparently there has not been investigation of that asserted crime. And there has not been any investigation to say that the various certificates from primary school, secondary school, NYSC, master's degree, that were all bearing different and conflicting names, had not been proved to belong to another person. Neither have they been proved not to belong to the person who claimed to be the owner of that. That apparently is putting the gentleman in a quandary.
You know, why the discrepancies in the first place? You have different certificates, bearing conflicting names, conflicting names. So
versions of the same names.
It is criminal if you ask me, because you have a name. When you were born, you were given a name. You went to school, you enrolled in school, primary school, secondary, university. So why would there be discrepancies in the name and all that? And these things, I don't know why politicians take this issue of being in power as if the world has come to an end. If you make a mistake in life, you take it. And this got to Supreme Court. That's the apex court in the country. And I'm not sure, I don't want to believe the Supreme Court had that judgment without investigation or without, finding out the truth of the matter. And if you want to bring yourself in the public domain, you have to clear yourself, probably have to do a back check by yourself, to ensure that, look, I'm coming out as a clean person, especially when it has to do with governance.
I think forgery is a crime, Kingsley.
Of course, forgery is a crime.
So if it is asserted, that person should be prosecuted, especially if there's evidence towards that.
Well, that's a different issue. What happened in this case had to do with the election in Bayelsa. that's the governorship election, and to say that the decisions of the court, which is final, it's not one that, I mean, people can make their comments and so on and so forth. So the final decision by the Supreme Court stands. And so nobody's returning to that. So, but if the allegations of forgery, the Supreme Court does not on its own prosecute people. The High Court does not on its own prosecute people. The Court of Appeal will not on its own prosecute people. The powers of prosecution reside in the Attorney General of a state, because it would be seem to be a state offense, or the power can then be delegated to the DPP. But I think that the issue is well beyond that, on the basis of the story that has been reported this morning. Kieran, you read that on the front page of the Punch. Now, assuming what Silva says, that Silva is the Minister of State for Petroleum, that the former Deputy Governor-elect is having suicidal tendencies, then the proper thing to do actually is not to ventilate this, but to ensure that it's on his suicide watch. It's on his, that's the most important thing. And they have to send in experts, you know, on counseling, giving him the right therapy. Are you with me? And just to recognize that, look, as the pedestrian saying goes, the downfall of a man is not the end of his life.
So he doesn't have to take
it's not the end of his life. Are you with me? Okay, suppose they ran the election and they were trashed in the course of the election.
Not only that, what about the governor-elect himself?
Precisely.
You know, who was already going to be a governor, chief executive of a state, who was denied that position because of the judgment. So what will he do? He would have come to suicide by now if he's taken in that direction.
Yeah, so those are the kind of examples that should be cited to the gentleman, assuming that his condition is that he's having or contemplating suicidal intentions. You know, to reassure him that this is not the end of his life. I mean, the governor-elect himself, on the eve of his inauguration, everybody saw the photographs. You saw the video. He was rehearsing. You know, riding in the van to inspect a guard of honor.
Took salute,
and then suddenly
the carpet was pulled from beneath his feet.
Well, then you had the court decision. So it's not the end of it's not the end of everything. It should stand firm. That's our appeal to him. I'm talking about now the gentleman with multiple names according to the court, so that he can pick up the pieces of his life, as it were.
Exactly. That's if he's not prosecuted.
And move on, yes.
Latest on COVID virus. So far, the 3 Chinese citizens who arrived on Ethiopian airline to Plateau have tested negative to COVID virus. Another foreigner was also tested in Lagos. He also tested negative. So far in Nigeria, it is only the index case, the Italian, who has tested positive. And his condition is said to be improving. In other words, his condition is out of the critical stage. He's not getting worse. He's improving gradually. And they will continue to test. The 2 newspapers have reported about the inability to trace passengers on the airline. I think they are exaggerating the report. The report provided was that there were 159 passengers on the aircraft. Some of them have already left Nigeria and returned to their country. Others gave addresses and telephone numbers for which they could not be traced, but many of them have been traced. There were 3 airline personnel at the airport that were in contact. They have been traced. 25 workers at the Owekoro factory, they too have been traced. And there were 2 drivers who moved him around and an ambulance. All the drivers have been traced. Their vehicles have been thoroughly fumigated. And so far, we have only 1 index case, and that is the only one. Meanwhile, many states have been on the alert, and they include Benue, Kaduna, Katsina, Gombe, Ekiti, as well as so many states are now on red alert over COVID virus. So the essence is not to be alarmed, to be calm. And there are reports about a discovery of a cure by a former chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, who is a pharmacist. Well, many people will wonder, if a virus is novel, is new, how come you now have a cure? There are similarities between SARS, that is the severe acute respiratory syndrome, as well as MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, and COVID-19 is also a respiratory ailment. Therefore, they are not too far from one another, and therefore, if there are indications that some medicament, as a pharmacist is now prescribing, can also cure COVID-19, it means we are heading towards a positive direction of having
but
a cure.
Iwu's assertion will have to be, put to test in the first place. He said the drug has been there since 2015, just like you pointed out, that there are similarities, between SARS, MERS, and the coronavirus. As the case may be, they're all viral in nature, and of course they're not too far from each other, except that you have to develop different therapies, to address them. And because of the traits of this one, the biological traits of this one is a little bit different. So you perhaps is yet to tell Nigerians, where he, because you have to conduct a kind of test, either on guinea pig or on humans, to be able to be sure that this can cure. That's most.
Usually, when drugs are found like that, there will be clinical tests for a specific period before they are now applied to humans.
Well, part of the story, and we can see that on page 7 of the Nation newspaper in greater detail. Iwo is saying that his research group had identified and patented a possible treatment for coronavirus as far back as 2015 because of the importance of remaining ahead of emergent infections through research. He said the drug discovery project started at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and continued in the U.S. when he was a visiting scholar at the Division of Experimental Therapeutics of Walter Reed Army Institute of Research in Washington, D.C. Let's note this. In 2014, Professor Morris Uwu, he was here as our guest on Good Morning Nigeria when we were discussing Ebola. And he later was a member of a committee set up by the federal government to work out, solutions with regard to either treatment or cure. I'm not quite sure what the outcome of that committee work was eventually, but he did say a few things on that occasion, the details of which are a bit remote for me to immediately recall. But again, he has stepped forward and he has met the Minister of Science and Tech on this particular issue. So let's see what the next steps will be. But it's a curious point that for a novel virus, how could you have discovered the treatment 5 years earlier?
Yes.
So that's the key point.
Exactly.
All right, so let's take our editorial this morning, and it is coming from the Blueprint newspaper. Time to curb violence against children, and it's at page 12.
Well, the whole idea is happen on the need to provide security for children. The editorial is happening on the fact that up till now there are still challenges that some children, when they are born, they are not registered at birth. And birth registration is supposed to be free and should be universal everywhere. They also happen on the cost implications of children who are, because they are not properly taken care of, it is imposing on the nation. They are also alluded to boys, about 829, including about 108 girls, who were employed among the civilian JTF. Again, this is part of the abuses of children who are involved in a war area. And so the editorial is happening on the need to provide protection for children, especially if you recall that the Child Rights Act was signed as far back as 2003. Many states of the Federation are having problems with it because there are cultural nuances that is in conflict with the law, and therefore they have not apparently domesticated it in their own state. But there goes the argument that if there is a law, is a federal law, it is applicable to all parts of the Federation. And even any state enacts any law and it becomes null and void to the extent of its contradiction with the federal law.
I don't see any reason, for a state not to enact a law that protects the children. What kind of cultural or traditional nuances are we talking about here? We have seen on social media several maltreatment of children, even mother and daughter. I saw one just yesterday, just pierced the little girl's head, blood flowing everywhere by her mother. We saw the ones of 2 months ago where the lady just flung the child as if she was in a wrestling bout. Right, so these are the things, and I don't see any culture in Africa that would not like to protect the children. These are toddlers. These are people who are below 10. Right, so I don't see any reason why.
Interestingly, a few incidences that have come to the public domain, the Nigerian police have rightly followed them up, and many of such parents have been arrested and they are facing prosecution. So they are being brought to the law.
All right, Bayo, thanks a lot for being around.
Thanks
We'll
indeed.
see you again tomorrow. Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll get ahead with our item for discussion.
Have love, you'll be able to unite, irrespective of tribe, religion, and culture. So we keep preaching on
views of some Nigerians on the issue as put together by Aisha Obali.
I don't understand this Almajiri, but I thank God for Kano State governor now that is saying that they should go back to the classroom. That any Almajiri you see in the highway should be arrested. So I thank God for Kano government now. They're trying to revive, to put them in one place and teach them. They should not allow them to go all over begging for alms, begging for food. It's not called for.
Turning them to nuisance within the society. I think if government can establish an institution that can take care of such knowledge they choose to impact on these children, if they can establish an institution that will incorporate that Islamic education, so that these children, instead of going on the street or having unhealthy training, so I think it will take care of that Almajiri.
To do away completely with them is, I don't think it will be possible, but it's gradually with time and awareness.
If federal government really want to end it, it will end it, because they have to. Maybe you should provide a school for them where they should go. There should not be all these streets begging. They have to eliminate it, and those give birth to them. They have to caution them, trace their parents, and caution them that you bring those people to order, so that they will stop, especially where you go to some place, I will not call the unit of a place. For you to even buy things to eat, they'll just come and jump back and say, please, please, please. So what the federal government should do, should provide a school for them. Let's train them from the beginning.
Because it's your culture, it's your to beg. The only way to stop it is to appeal to them. They are the people to stop it. Many other, because they take it as a culture. Those who are well to do, they want those who worship them. That is the thing. To stop them, they are the people in charge.
All right, thank you very much, Aisha Obali, there for the Vox Pop. With us in the studios to discuss the issue, let's welcome Dr. Hamid Baboy. He's Executive Secretary of the Universal Basic Education Commission. Dr. Baboy, pleasure to have you on the board.
Thank you very much.
Wow. Also here with us in the studios is Mohammed Sabo Kiana. He's Team Lead Almajiri Rights Initiative. Pleasure to have you around on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay.
And let us also introduce Salihu Tanko Yakasai. Is a special advisor on media to Governor of Kano State. Mr. Yakasai joins us from our Kano studio. You're welcome to the program. Joins us from our Kano studio. You're welcome to the program. Joins us from our Kano studio.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
And also from Maiduguri, we have Miriama Dekwa. Miriama is an education specialist, Bauchi Field Office, UNICEF. Miriam Adikwa, it's a pleasure to have you this morning on our show.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone.
All right, we have the guests right here with us. We're expecting another guest. If we're able to get him in the course of the conversation, of course, he would take part in this from one of our other network centers. But let's begin first by just having an understanding of the Almajiri system in the classical sense, before we start getting into the challenge of now getting the Almajiris off the street. I'd like to begin with Dr. Hamid Baboy, the Executive Secretary of UBEC. We keep hearing about the Almajiri phenomenon, Almajiri syndrome. What does the Almajiri system mean in the classical sense of it?
Thank you very much for asking the question. In the classical sense, the Almajiri system had been an integral part of the society in terms of the various Muslim communities, isn't it, that had inhabited. Going back to Kanembonu, it started about 11,000. It's about 1,000 years old now. in this part of the country. It provided the literacy required to produce the literati of the society. It provided an opportunity for the younger generation in terms of basic education. Basic education, memorizing the Quran, trying to read and write, going into other books. The various jurisprudential literature that was available in the various Islamic disciplines, but as well as the other sciences in terms of arithmetic. Usually applied in the area of jurisprudence for inheritance and other things, isn't it? Calculating percentages. In the area of astronomy, using, in fact, in Kanembonu, again, it's one of the oldest, isn't it, that you find. And that's the reason why you still have Bonu as the hub, isn't it, for a larger percentage of Almajiri, that has been there. It's something that had been an integral part of the society, that has served the society. It was never associated in the initial phase with begging. Why? Because society, just like we build a school, provide the facilities, didn't it? Get our children, get to that. That's what the traditional authorities were doing during that particular period. Providing for the scholars who would come, providing food, and even of recent, I think begging is a recent phenomenon. Most of us who grew up in these communities, isn't it? The individual that take food to the house of the Malam. It's not the Malam children who come to beg or anything of that sort, isn't it? In that particular regard. And that's why it became an integral part, isn't it? Of most of the intellectual activities. With the coming of the colonial period, isn't it? We started now having other competitions within the educational sphere. The conventional education as we know it today, isn't it, became an integral part of the society. Attention for over a period of time, isn't it, started shifting from seeing how do you take care of the Almajiri, isn't it, and integrate it with what we had, isn't it, in the northern parts of the country, it had been very slow. In the southwest, interestingly, the first integrated school where you are getting now the traditional along with the modern, isn't it, started much earlier. In Lagos, the mission societies, isn't it, in Ibadan and other places, isn't it, began that process. And therefore, the whole idea of an integrated school that is now bringing in the Almajiri element. Almajiri, the meaning of Almajiri is Al-Muhajir, the person who has migrated, isn't it, who has now dedicated his life, isn't it, to the service, isn't it, of God. I think that integration had been very important. But somehow of recent, we started having a problem where the neglect kept on moving, isn't it, to a crisis point. The government intervention, again, isn't it, was also not strong enough to meet the population demands. Population increase had been very high, isn't it, in most of the northern states that now have the problem as an endemic one. And I think we have to understand that from that broad historical perspective to be able to appreciate the challenges that we have on the ground.
All right, and in the course of the discussion, we'll find out the point of derailment. You just reminded me of high school history, Kingsley, Kanembonu Empire, well-organized empire, and I'm not surprised that Almajiri system, came from there. It is a thought-out plan, from what I have explained.
May Idris Aluma.
It's really good to recall that. And let me bring you in. You're a younger Nigerian, but I'm sure because of your initiative that you understand what it's all about. Can we get any more explanation from you with respect to the meaning of Almajiri and what the intentions were when it was established?
Thank you very much. Just like you said, I'm younger, and of course, like Doctor have said, I believe he has given a more elaborate explanation as to the meaning of Almajiri and the original intent of the Almajiri system. And for me, the intent, of course, is for the children to have the Quranic education. And part of what I also learned is the reason why it all began, and has to do with the fact that the scholars who are meant to teach these children were indeed far in between their parent, their original parent, and so the parent had to, send their children far away, just like we all do send our children far away to other part of the country to learn the education, which is fine, And that, of course, worked during that period. But the reality of today had it that such a migrational aspect of the practice where children will have to move from as far as Sokoto to Nasarawa Stadium to come and acquire this education is part of the reason why we're having this crisis that we're talking about at the Almajiri system. So with that, I'm talking much. I think the doctor said a lot about what the system is and what the intent is. And if you're going to reduce the whole intent of the Almajiri system, is for the children to learn the Quran education. I think that is the main intent of it. And I believe once we focus on that as well, we may be able to find a best approach to be able to come out of this present crisis we have on it.
Okay, just before we bring in the special advisor on media to the Kano State Governor, I want to stay with the two guests here at the Abuja studios. Now, if the original intent is to say, okay, migrate from point A to point B to undertake Islamic or Quranic education, after the Quranic education, what do you do as that Almajiri? Or what were you expected to do as that if you came in from Sokoto, for instance, to Nasarawa, and then you have done the Almajiri thing, we're not sure what the duration of the course is or what, after that, what next?
Yeah, firstly, let me make this point that the issue of migration, again, it will depend upon the context. In most of the cases, from the historical records we have on these issues, you find that it was more of a domesticated system where people were within their localities, and the localities were able to provide for the students. Migration takes place when the rural areas from where most of these children come from will not have the carrying capacity to really feed these children, to take care of these children, and so on and so forth. And the scholars find it easy now to start drifting into the cities, as we have. And, again, we have to begin also to look at it within the socio-economic context, isn't it, of our entire nation. How do we ensure that we, reduce rural poverty or at least increase rural prosperity to a point that it can have the carrying capacity of taking care of its own within this party. My argument had always been that even without Al-Majirchi, that migration will take place, and it has been taking place. The Chirani that you find after the harvest, isn't it, people will have to troop into the city to look for work. It can be the menial jobs, it can be the Maigadis, it can be other things, isn't it, But for Al-Majiri system, it had always now worked initially as up to maybe, isn't it, the 20th century, the communities had been able to cater for these students. They go to school, learn the Quran. There is what I call the basic education. Basically, everybody is expected to learn the Quran, to read and write. Now, the second stage would be specialization. Those that have learned the Quran, could read and write and so on, could go into other professions. Farmers, they could be traders, they could do other things, isn't it,
Astronomers,
no, but now you have the second crop, isn't it, the next stage of the secondary, isn't it, and the tertiary education that involves those graduates, isn't it, from the local schools, now going into higher studies. They stay within, some of them travel for years to go to Saudi Arabia, to go to Egypt, to go to become real scholars. Some of them staying there, some of them coming back. Now to stay with the emirs and the chiefs and other things, isn't it, providing advice as advisors, religious advisors, as senior teachers again, teaching the other generations. So it has been working as a system. But somehow the dislocation started happening, isn't it, over a period. Increase in population, neglect, a lot of other factors that had been going on, isn't it, to a point that it becomes a broken system. that now people will have to look at and see how do we address it, and address it in a sustainable and serious manner, not just cosmetics when people talk about the issues, isn't it, in a very superficial manner.
So this means that many scholars have benefited from a Almajiri system when it was working.
So many.
And
classical sense.
Classical sense of it, yes. Let's go to Kano, where we have Salihu Tanko Yakasai, special advisor to the governor of that state on media. Kano is a very big state, and Kano city as well, of course, has a population that is higher than any other city in this country. And I'm sure that when your governor hit the headline last week talking about the Almajiri and the action the government intends to take, many Nigerians welcomed that development. Let's have your own view of the Almajiri system that has failed. Of course, the UBEC chair has already given us a good backgrounding as to the intent of Almajiri system, which derailed, in the course of time. What's your own view? And again, why has your state government taken the action it did?
Well, the pronouncement did happen last week, but I can categorically tell you that His Excellency Dr. Abdullahi Umar Ganduje has started planning much earlier than last week about how to address this issue of out-of-school children who are mostly the Almajiris. As we are all aware, or if I can take us back to his swearing-in speech during his inauguration for his second term, that was when he made the pronouncement that education in Kano is not only free but also compulsory from primary level up to secondary level, and that has to also address the issue of the Almajiri system. And I can tell you that even before then, His Excellency Dr. Abdullahi Umar Ganduje has already, even in his first tenure, has already started laying the foundation for addressing this issue of out-of-school children by establishing one of the first things that he did more than 3 to 4 years ago was the establishment of an agency called Sangaya Islamia and Quranic Schools Management Board, which is solely responsible for the regulation of, if you may, of this type of schools. So that agency is responsible for taking the data. So far, they have registered over 13,000 of these Almajiri schools in Kano State. So, but not only to take the data and the registration, but also to help in planning. And this is what the result of what we are seeing today. So that from that time to today, when the policy is now being implemented, a lot of things have gone into play. But most importantly, what I want people to understand is that we are not just His Excellency Dr. Abdullahi Ganduje is not just only interested in seeing these kids off the street, not begging, you understand, but there's more to it. He wants to see them in school, not just learning the Quranic school, which is the Quranic education, which is traditionally what they are doing, but also the integration of Western education into the system. You know, without taking them, it's not a must that they have to go to primary school. They can be in their schools and then be also learning English, maths, general studies, so that they can be able to have that basics that Dr. Boboy was talking about. So that is the whole essence. And there are a number of things that have been done. It's not just a policy statement. One of the things that he has done is that he has so far taken data of these students out of about 1 million out-of-school children in Kano State, according to UNICEF data. The Kano State government has realized that about half of them are those that are Almajiris. So they have taken their data, their names, their states, the schools that they go to in each and every ward. And then the next thing is that those that are not in schools, His Excellency just 2 days ago inspected pilot schools, pilot boarding Almajiri schools one in each of the senatorial zones, in partnership with the federal government, that they are going to take these students that are not in any school, just roaming around the streets, and take them to these boarding schools, where they will be fed, they will be accommodated, they will be fed and everything. So it's not just to ban them on the street and then, just for the beautification of the city or something like that. No, it's a fundamental human right. And then secondly, His Excellency has employed, the state government has employed up to 8,000 new students just a couple of weeks ago. These new teachers, 8,000 of them, the whole purpose of this is to be able to send them to these Quranic schools, to be able to go and teach these kids the subjects that I listed, English, maths, and general studies. The whole aim is to integrate them into the system. But not only that, most importantly, His Excellency wants a situation whereby these people can become, like he always uses the term, can become an asset to the state government, where they can be able to be productive in the near future. They can be able to add value to the society. To raise the point that Dr. Boboy has said, some of this, the system is not as bad as it is. My own father, Alhaji Tanko Yakasai, who was once at his own childhood, was also an Almajiri. He went to Harlawa village in present-day Bauchi State and studied in one of the Sangaya system. And that is how he was able to gain his own Islamic studies, Islamic knowledge, and up to the extent that he is very vast in not just Quran, but Hadith and other aspects. So this is what Dr. Abdullahi Umar Ganjude is trying to do. He's trying to make sure that these kids are an asset to the people of Kano and Nigeria at large, and not just a liability to the state.
All right, thank you very much, Salihu Tanko Yakasai, for your opening comments. We have a number of questions that we're going to ask you with regard to what's playing out in Kano. But earlier we introduced Miriama Dikwa, who is the education specialist at the Bauchi Field Office of UNICEF. You can see her there on the screen. Miriama, tell us, I mean, UNICEF, of course, has been in the forefront of rolling out data of out-of-school children. One of the last reports I recall indicated that the phenomenon had ballooned from what used to be some 10 million out-of-school children to about 13 million out-of-school children. And usually the current operational system that is spawning the Almajiri kids on the streets.
Okay. As you said, the global initiative for out-of-school children, as published by UNICEF in 2012, estimated 10.5 million children out of school. And when we look at the Universal Basic Education Commission report that was also published in 2010, estimated about 1.9 million children studying in Quranic schools, as it has been said by the Executive Secretary of UBE. The core subject, their integrated Quranic Sangaya education system. Some of those Quranic schools are operating that, while others are not operating. And UNICEF, having the mandate to advocate for the protection of the rights of every child, and then to help them meet up with their basic needs and to expand their opportunities for full potential, works with the government of Nigeria and then other state government to make sure that those children, the 9.5 million children that are enrolled in various type of Quranic schools, have access to basic education. And in that direction, UNICEF has been supporting the integration of the basic literacy, numeracy, life skills. And then when we look at the life skills, we look at some of the foundational skills, the transferable skills, and then the vocational skills that are being integrated into the curriculum so that the children can also have opportunity and then access to the basic education that could make them compete with other children. But what UNICEF is doing is not really commiserating the number of the children that we have, in those Quranic schools, because there are millions of them. And then right now, the support that is being provided is in some few states, though we have seen some kind of improvement, in efforts to reducing those out-of-school children. But we feel the challenges still remain because looking at the supply side and then also the demand to cater for those children, especially those that are not in the integrated Quranic schools, we still have a long way to go. And that's why in our efforts and then our roles as UNICEF, leading the education sectors, we are working with the government to see how we can come up with some strategies to reduce those numbers of out of school, but more specifically to seeing how we can include, as I said, those vocational skills, life skills, literacy, numeracy in the Quranic school, so that those children can also, benefit from the basic education as part of their rights, to fulfill their full potentials.
All right, Miriam, thanks for that. We'll get back to you. Let's come back to Abuja. What we have come to understand is that the Almajiri phenomenon, what happened to the phenomenon, could be described as a system failure. Not that it was not a good, well-intended program, from its origin. Now, several governments have actually, in the past, preferred solutions, or rather, brought up policies, to address the Almajiri issue. I recall that during the last administration, not the current government, let's say the government of Goodluck Jonathan, we had the Almajiri schools, that he tried to bring up in several states of the north. One wouldn't know what actually, happened to that. And I want to ask you this, Kiana, you're a team lead, Almajiri Rights Initiative. Now, we have seen the situation. We have seen what some governors in the northern part of the country are doing at the moment. Typical example is Kano, Kaduna, and perhaps others are keen into that. This your initiative is the actions of, or are the actions of these governments or governors addressing your initiative?
Okay, thank you very much. And so, let me first of all appreciate the Kano State Governor for the effort is put in to address the Almajiri child right crisis within his state, and the step he has taken so far. And to answer your question, in fact, that is, for me, the bane of the whole problem and the reason why we're still talking about the Almajiri system and up to today. And over time, the government policies and initiative to address this issue has always been that of a quick fix, or to either fulfill certain political promises. I think addressing the Almajiri issue is something that has to be well thought, well planned, and executed over a long time period. We have all agreed here that the system worked before and it has failed. And when a system fails, what do? You reform it. And what does it entail to reform something? You have to either add something or you remove something from what has failed to make it more functional, more performing, and more educative for the children and for the society. So if we want to reform the Almajiri system to achieve the goal that we want, then we should be transparent in our approach. We should also introduce new approach to addressing it. What the essay to the governor has said on the step they have taken, I mean, it's not too different from what the previous government have done before, and it has not worked. It has not worked. I'm just worried. I pray it works, but I'm just worried about the sustainability of the approach they are taking now. You are going to be, according to him now, there are about 13,000 of the schools scattered around the state, and then they've also employed some 8,000 teachers to send to some of these schools. And what that means is that you're going to be feeding the children 3 times a day. You're going to be catering for their shelter, their medical bills, and all that. And if you look at that, doing it for millions of children, day in, day out, week in, week out, months and years, without even a clear exit plan for it. I mean, I just feel that the financial burden is going to be too much for it to be sustained.
Now, what should be the right thing? What is your initiative?
So the right thing for me, we must be able to reform the system and structure it in such a way that we have a shared responsibility between the parent, the government, and the community. Without any of this, I don't see a situation where you can continue with such approach for a long time. It's never done. You cannot continue to feed children year in, year out. The government, I mean, the government cannot do it alone. The first responsibility.
Well, some of the challenges, Kiana has already highlighted them, which is the sheer number, the dilapidated condition in which these Almajiris find themselves in. Some of them have even nowhere to sleep. But I think some few of the challenges that really the government is battling with is the continued influx of Almajiris that are always trooping into Kano. Kano is a very big cosmopolitan city. It is an economic hub, and as such, a lot of people, not just within the state, you don't just have rural urban migration within the state, but you also have from neighboring states and even neighboring countries. You have them coming in from the Niger Republic. You have them coming in from Chad and what have you. So basically, fundamentally, that is one of the major challenges that we have. They keep coming into Kano and they keep adding the number and unregulated, if I may add. So this is one of the major challenges that we are facing. The other challenge is that of resources. The state government is, of course, battling with so many competing issues, competing demands, and as such, it's a bit Herculean task to be able to provide enough resources to be able to do this, just like Kiana had also rightly mentioned. And then the major problem is that of lack of the political will by all the leaders involved to be able to come together to address these issues. These are some of the challenges among other ones that we are facing. And I think to add to the last challenge that we are facing is that there is need for collaborative effort between the state, in particular the Northern Governors Forum. They need to come together, speak with one voice, because if Kano is doing its own effort, then other states are not equally responding, reciprocating, then you're going to have a problem. Whatever Kano does will not be sustainable. But to answer to the issues raised by Kiana, there has to be a starting point. We have to start. We've been talking about these things, and few leaders are taking the lead, the bold step in addressing the issue. We have to start from somewhere. And some of these things are already happening. For instance, now the federal government is feeding primary school people from primary 1 to 3. That is being done. It has lessened the burden of school feeding program from the state. Well, in Kano, His Excellency Dr. Abdullahi Ganduje has extended that from primary 3, from primary 4 to 6, which has also, because of that feeding alone, has increased the number of school enrollment in the state. And some of these new students that you have coming into the school system are also some of the Almajiris. So already there's a provision in that school feeding program that is catered for this type of system. Then you also have a brand new initiative by the state government, which is the Sangea feeding program. About 1,000 schools, these out-of-school children, have been identified as a pilot phase where they will be sending food donations to the schools to be able to feed these children. Because one of the reasons that the Al-Rammas or the Ustaz or the Malams give is that they do not have enough resources to be able to feed these children, so they send them out to beg. So the government is saying that if that is one of the major reasons why these kids are on the streets, so the thing to do is to be able to support them and complement them in terms of feeding these almajiris so that they can stay in their school. But you need to understand that you have to have partners in these things. You have to have people that are willing to come and support the state government to ensure that this policy succeed. Nobody wants to see these kids. We all know the consequences of leaving these kids to roam about. We see the insecurity challenges that they have posed to the country as a whole, and so on and so forth. So what needs to be done is the coordinated effort between all the stakeholders involved. Luckily enough, which is very, very key and fundamental, is that even before the pronouncement, privately, His Excellency has sat down with these alarammas, malams and sheikhs of these schools, with a number of them. He has sat down, explained to them that this cannot go on. It cannot continue like this. There has to be an end to this type of system whereby you see kids on the street roaming. And a lot of them have accepted His Excellency's proposal, and they are willing, and they are already doing whatever they can to be able to support them. So the key is to have partners come in, join hands with the government, and be able to provide solutions, to be able to provide assistance, to the state government in ensuring that. And fundamentally, parents also need to come in. You have to, Islamically, you have to take care of your own children. You have to provide for them. If you do not have the means to get married, don't. If you do not have the means to take care of this, find a solution to it, and so on and so forth. So, of course, there are concerns, but this policy will be able to be. There will be a lot of amendments, there will be a lot of adjustments, but like I said, we have to start from somewhere. We have started. We have seen a number of goodwills that are coming into Kano. UNICEF is already helping us. A number of donor agencies are already helping us in this particular. Even today, the Kano State Government, the Kano State Governor, the Executive Council meeting is going to hold, and DFID, as one of the major partners, is going to make a presentation, among other things. So we have a number of them that are helping us. What we need is the support, and we are already getting it. We have some few states that have also banned street begging. We have the FCT Abuja issuing a statement because of the possible influx of those that are going to leave Kano because of this ban. We have Muris. Just this morning I read on the newspaper that Muris is also adding its voice. So we have a lot of goodwill that we are riding on. So please, let us not be pessimistic in this approach. I am a person that sees the glass as half full rather than half empty. If there's an effort to deliver solutions, please let us all join hands. Let us not be pessimists. Let's try our best and see that we come together, give it our shot. At least if there are errors along the line, we iterate and change and amend and move on. But the fact of the matter remains, this cannot go on as it is. The system has failed. There's need to reform it. Everybody agrees. So what we are doing is providing the solutions, and what we want Nigerians and the rest of the world is to help us in achieving it. If Kano gets it right, Northern Nigeria gets it right, the whole country gets it right, and Africa will get it right at the end of the day.
All right. Thank you so much. I'd like to appreciate your comments, because you have opened up to let us in to the challenges that is also facing Kano State as it tries to implement the policy. And one good thing you have said, because since like a point I was thinking that he's already Uhuru in Kano from his first comment, right? But after Kena has responded to our questions, Yakasai opened up and we can feel him. Now let's go to Maiduguri, where we have Miriama Depa. Miriama, you are of the UNICEF, and of course UNICEF has played a key role in some of our developmental efforts in the country, especially with respect to education. Now, what are you coming with this time around? You have told Nigerians on several occasions that we are drifting, and that there are many children out of school. What are you preferring for Kano and the other states who are having this issue of Almajiri influx?
Okay. I would like to say that looking at the mandate of UNICEF again, UNICEF has the role of stimulating policy changes like the Kano state government is doing. As we've seen, I think some other states also like Kaduna. We also have that role of supporting the state governments at all levels, in identifying the out-of-school children and then the issues that are associated with why those children are out of school, and supporting the government also to target strategies that will reduce the number of out-of-school children. This is what UNICEF is doing as its role, towards improving the basic education sector. And then there is a shift also from UNICEF end to make sure that these children have the basic education that is required. UNICEF, is supporting, as I said earlier, the integration of Quranic Sangaya education. This is what we are doing in most of the states. But before doing that, we supported about 7 states, to track, to map household and to track out-of-school children. And then the results are really amazing, from those states. And that's what gives us the directions and then give us, the power to have more consultations with parents, with stakeholders, with other development bodies, to see how we can come up together and strategize for these children. And right now, we are integrating, as I said, in so many states, about 6 states where we have integrated Quranic education going on. And then this start, we supported the Universal Basic Education Commission, in coming up with an integrated Quranic education curriculum, which is being used to have a kind of harmonized way of supporting these children. And then as part of the shift also, we have developed some primers, that ensure that there are kind of quality in what the children are learning. We've also come up with some training packages, and then we train also the facilitators that are in those integrated Quranic centers on how we can, they can teach, some basic literacy, basic numeracy, and then some life skills. So we have those training packages for the facilitators. And then if you could see in some of the states where we have the integrated Quranic school going on, and the children are learning those basic, education skills. As I say in the package also, we are integrating, the skills, that especially the vocational skills that enable them, to be self-reliant after they have completed, the Quranic schools which they are attending. And there's also a lot of service delivery that UNICEF is supporting in those integrated Quranic centers in terms of improving the learning environment, looking at the water sanitation, that's the wash facilities, and then the environment where the learners are taking, the subject and others. And we also have like some monitoring observation of what is going on in those Quranic centers. So these are some of the efforts that UNICEF has put in place to see that we provide the basic education to those learners, that the underserved one, disadvantaged, wherever they find them themselves in those Quranic schools. So these are some of the initiatives that we have. And then in addition to that, we have established also within the Quranic schools what we call the center-based management committees, that is made up of community representatives that really provide an oversight function to what is happening in those integrated Quranic schools. And then they support in terms of monitoring and making sure that the learners there are learning, the facilitators are doing what is expected of them, and then there is a kind of quality in what is happening. So, and these... All
right, Miriam Adikwa, just before we let you go from Maiduguri Network Center, I'm sure you listened to Kiana here with us in Abuja and Yakasai in Kano highlight and then address some of the practical challenges in reforming the Almajiri system. Against the background of what UNICEF is also doing, what is your reaction to those practical issues that they have raised with respect to how the system might be further transformed?
Yeah, our reaction as UNICEF is to make sure, like the Kianan and then Yakase said, you know, to work with all arms of government, to work with other development partners, and to involve parents and everybody to look at those policies on ground and then come up with workable strategies that can really enable us address the issues at hand. So we need to have everybody on the table and then to look at what is workable, what can we really sustain, and then to make sure that the children really have access and then opportunities for basic education.
We'd like to thank you so much, Miriama Dekwa, for your immense contribution this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. At this point, we'd like to once again say thank you and goodbye for now. Hope to see you again on this program. Miriama Dekwa is the Education Specialist, Bauchi Field Office, UNICEF. Bauchi Field Office, UNICEF.
Thank you.
Field Office, UNICEF. Watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Entails. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, the conversation continues.
All right, you're welcome back, and you're still on Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Let's return to two guests here with us in the Abuja studios. We'll still have Yakasai in Kano, and presently we'll also be linking up with another guest from our MENA Center. But Dr. Baboy, Executive Secretary of UBEC, you know, the more one examines or interrogates better the Almajiri dysfunctional system that we currently have, the more it appears that, look, a conceptual framework for dealing with it will have to take care of the cultural, religious, educational, social welfare, and demographic crisis that the country faces. Now, listening to what practical measures the Kano state government is adopting and the inherent challenges and the optimism that the government is approaching this issue, I want you to come in here on the basis of UBEC. Well, we no longer have the phenomenon or the syndrome of state governments not paying their counterpart funds in order to access UBEC funding. But to what extent might what Kano is doing now, assuming we are using that as a pilot case, succeed? Where, for instance, you are having a virtual scholarship being given to millions of the equivalent of primary school pupils. How feasible might that be? How then do you also address the Kiana proposition that, look, this ought to be a shared responsibility?
No, thank you very much for the question. I've been keenly interested in the arguments about sustainability, about other issues. I remember in 2004, I was the director of Arewa House of Ahmadu Bello University in Kaduna. And the northern governors requested, isn't it, you know, for a proposal. How would we solve this problem? We gave them a proposal. But one key element that we said, isn't it, you know, they ought to look at is also the other dimensions of the problem. Yes, it's an educational problem. But at the end of the day, it's also, as you have mentioned, isn't it, you know, a socio-economic problem that we have already alluded to. We have also, again, looked at it, isn't it, you know, from, the other dimensions,
cultural,
the cultural ones, and a lot of other crises, you know, the demography. The fertility rates, I think, for those states that we are talking about, you know, there are different figures, but they are well above, isn't it, you know, 6.2, 6.3, and so on and so forth. By the time you finish solving the current problem, the numbers that are coming into the system, isn't it, would be much more than, isn't it, what you are struggling with at the initial, isn't it, phase. So I think there are a lot of these factors, isn't it, that are there. But 2 or 3 issues that I would want to emphasize. When we gave that proposal to the northern governors, isn't it, and I remembered, isn't it, Governor Shekarau at that time from Kano was also the chairperson of that particular committee, at the Northern Governors Forum, was to get a regional framework that could be taken. Why? Because at that time there were a lot of initiatives. Ahmad Sani Yerima Bakura was having his own initiatives in Zampara, isn't it, Those in Kano, isn't it? Kano for the first time was spending the highest amount ever spent on Almajiris, 200 million. And I mean that. At the moment, if you're talking of 200 million, it doesn't mean much, isn't it, in terms of what the government is doing. The current Kano government is spending billions upon billions on that particular problem. So the idea is that unless and until, and I told them that you are giving free feeding in Zampara. My kids and kin in Adamawa, of course, if there's free food in Zampara, isn't it, we will go. And they went and overwhelmed the system. It broke down. Now, Kano was also trying to now have a lot of initiatives. Again, they trooped from Cameroon, from, as Yakas was saying, isn't it, from Niger, from Upper Burkina Faso, from all those states, isn't it, At the end of the day, Kano is a magnet because it is one of the few states that can generate a surplus that others could take advantage of. So at the end of the day, I think that regional framework is very important for us to have. Otherwise, there is no system, wherever you place it, that can work. Kano is doing a wonderful job, isn't it? We have been in touch with the governor. In fact, when it was launched, it's just that because of visibility, we couldn't land in Kano. We had to come back, isn't it? UBEC is a partner in this particular process. The BESDA program that is also supporting, isn't it? That particular program. And we hope it succeeds. But we have to have the stakeholders, and I think it has been mentioned, the parent has to be on board. It's irresponsible for any parent to come and say that, look here, I have just gone to Amalam, given him my child, and that's it. How he feeds, where he sleeps, isn't it, whether he's studying or not, and so on, is not my problem. We have to change attitudes and behavior to a point that people should feel responsible for their words. Should feel responsible that if I bring out a child into this world, isn't it, I have a responsibility. And I think this has to be there. The other aspect is also the ulama, the Islamic scholars. There has to be the sensitization. Because sanctions, yes, can help. But I think the most important thing is to see how do we change attitudes? How do you educate people? Interestingly, the major scholars are all on board. I remember we were in Bauchi, to launch a similar program, isn't it, from UBEC with the governor, with Sheikh Ayru Bauchi, and all the other scholars. They were there and very supportive. We were in different parts of the country, in Gombe, in all parts. There is that support. But I think now is to ensure that we galvanize this support from the traditional rulers. We were with the Emir of Argungu here, if you remember, isn't it, discussing the same issue about a year ago. It's to get all those actors acting on the same page. And I think that's the most important thing, and ensuring that there is a coordinated support that can be given, and the kind of policies that are sustainable. UBEC is prepared. At the moment, UBEC is working. It started with 9 pilot states, isn't it? Interestingly, Kano, the Almajiri school that were built during the previous regime that you are talking about, Kano yesterday wrote asking for permission to open the schools from UBEC. We said, go ahead. Because we want the schools to be used. They had been built, isn't it, for that particular purpose that Kano is there. So anybody who is saying that, no, we have infrastructure that we cannot use because of this, because of that, is because you don't have a plan to tackle the Almajiri issue.
I was just wondering, Kirian, listening to Dr. Baboy, there's another element that we can introduce into this conversation as how to conceive of the Almajiri dysfunctional system and therefore what to do to reform it. It raised the issue of immigration. I mean, if people are coming from Cameroon, from Chad, from Niger, from Burkina Faso, the parents who have these children are not Nigerians. They don't pay taxes for the Nigerian system. So why then should your children benefit from what we're going to do? And then you overwhelm the system.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I was going, before you came in. There are fundamental issues here. Unresolved fundamental issues that has not been addressed for so many years. And now that has culminated into what we have seen now today as an influx of Almajiris everywhere from all parts of Africa in the name of education. So I think the scholars were overwhelmed by the population, right? And of course, what the Kenya raised as to be the shared responsibility is not there. The parents are not making contribution. And how much of these challenges can Kano state government really, contain? We're talking about healthcare, we're talking about shelter, we're talking about feeding, and all of that. And Kenya,
but there's a problem that I needed to raise because I'm worried about the spending aspect, about the sustainability. We need to take this Almajiri school, the integrated school, as an integral part of our educational system. Because when we start talking about, is this sustainable, spending money, doing this, feeding, have we ever asked that about the conventional schools?
Yes.
We are spending billions upon billions, isn't it, in conventional school, making sure that they work, isn't it, For a long time, there has been very little spending on the Almajiri schools.
Good. And that was why I recalled vividly, at the beginning of this conversation, that under Goodluck administration then, we had Almajiri school. What happened to those schools? Or were they not really built? Now, I'm bringing you in again, Sabo Kiana. You raised some very key elements in this conversation that require further examination. And first of all, the first one is the shared responsibilities, which you mentioned. And Dr. Boboy also talked about what he did when he was in Arua. Right. What about the governors of Northern Nigeria coming together? They have, Northern Governors Forum and what have you. You have a good initiative, which is, of course, on the right of the Almajiris. What have you done with that platform in terms of, reaching out to these governors and other key stakeholders on what can be done to bring this to reform that you are talking about? Because without the reform, I don't think the Almajiri phenomenon is going to cease. It's not going to cease. The reform is required. So what are you doing?
So, to answer your question, what are we doing in engaging or reaching out to these governors and leaders? Over the years, before the 2019 election, we did a campaign, tried to reach out to political leaders across all board, from the presidency, the governors, the assembly members, asking them what are their plans, how are they going to address this. And gladly also, just yesterday, I had the pleasure of meeting with one of the state governors, who has also taken steps to address this issue and offering to also contribute in how to have a more sustainable implementation of achieving the ending of the Almajiri crisis within the state. But so going on to also contribute to what Dr. Boboy said, I think my point about sustainability has to do with the fact that if you want to achieve intervention for these children around education, healthcare, decent livelihood at adulthood, and decent shelter, I strongly believe that we cannot achieve a measurable, sustainable, scalable intervention under the current traditional Almajiri system, where you have the schools scattered around, unregulated, and then you have again children coming from other states, just what I've mentioned. And my point is if you have planned for 100 children today or within this period, and you don't have a framework that stops more from coming, and then you have more coming to join it, you cannot be able to address that. And that's what my talk around sustainability is hinged on. It's not as if the aid should not be the money should not be spent on them. No, but when you are spending the money and more are coming, then you become overwhelmed, and then, so what my point is that we can have a framework that provide for these children, but also prevent more from coming so that you can have a measurable intervention, okay? That's the point I'm making around sustainability. So indeed, we need almost a single one framework that can be adopted and replicated across board, a uniform one, and that is what I strongly believe the northern governors need to lock some people in a room, give them different approaches, to look at what are the strengths and weaknesses, and then bring it all together, and let's have one model, one framework that can be adopted in such a way that is sustainable and measurable in terms of output.
Yeah, okay. Well, Kiana, thank you very much. Let's not assume that we are talking about restricting people from movement. Quite clearly, that would be a breach of the provisions of the Constitution. Still, the problem that we are dealing with is that the law also recognizes that you cannot have vagrants. You cannot have a child and then you abandon that child. You cannot have a child, say, at one end of the country. You cannot be a parent at one end of the country and then your child is in another end of the country and is uncatered for. I mean, all the key points have been indicated. Dr. Boboy illustrated very well that, look, Zamfara started something, but suddenly people from Amajiri, from other parts of the north, now found...
I'm only giving up.
Yeah, no. I mean, found that, as an example, they came and then overwhelmed the system. So these are some of the practical issues that we have to deal with, so that when you have, as it were, virtually uniform programs going on and catering for these persons, it's a lot easier. We had indicated we're going to go to Mina, but we are having some technical glitches with that. So we're going to take our tweets now and then return to our guests to get their closing thoughts. Mike Ayankwa, to remove the Amajiri from the streets is a welcome development. Most are susceptible to fall into the hands of evildoers who use them to carry out their nefarious activities. These Amajiri would ordinarily be able-bodied young men and women in future whose potentials could help in development. They have been on the streets is anathema to development. Well-to-do individuals giving them food, money, clothes in the name of charity. Those individuals are not encouraging them. Instead, they are exacerbating their condition.
All right. From Ibrahim Moduaji, it's right time to reform or ban the begging in the name of Amajiri. It's a good step in the right direction taken by some governors, but concrete plans should be put in place before the ban or any reform, as its nature is very complex, so that the ban or reform would be sustainable.
Mohammed Kuranga, had Amajiri schools been maintained on equal footing with the conventional schools, Amajiris wouldn't have been roaming the streets by now. They are children too. Amajiris do not beg in the Middle East, so why here?
Okay, let's take this from Steve Bond, 007. The program has to be reformed. There is no Islamic country that practices this. It is even a sin to neglect children and expose them to the element uncared for. Boko should not be, what is he talking about here? Okay, he said that, well, what I understand is that they are vulnerable to Boko Haram recruitment.
All right, this is Khalifa Dikwa. Khalifa Dikwa too, it says state governments must reform their Amajiri system.
Okay, now from
Umar Usman.
Umar Musa Usman. It's not every Amajiri that roams the street in the name of begging. I reside in Maiduguri and I have seen a boy that stays with his parents begging for food in the name of Amajiri. I've also known Zangaya, Amajiri Learning Center, where the Amajiris don't go out to beg. That's another dimension.
That's another dimension, yeah. But the major phenomenon is that we have seen them in the videos, and we see them as part of the urban blight in our country. You see, they are Amajiri. They are usually often dressed in rags.
No, but what she's saying is that there are children who have parents but who still go out to beg.
That is true. That's I agree.
That's
with
what
you.
she's citing.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. We have another set of twists. Momo Kabiru. If really the North wants to end Amajiri on the street, the zakah of the able Muslim folks is enough to take care of that challenge, but only when it's sincerely given and done.
Now, Yarima Alaji Hamza, government is not sincere on the issue of our Amajiri system because even the approach is not properly designed. Therefore, federal and state governments have to provide enough schools and proper way of feeding them. This will help to stop Amajiri begging on the streets.
Festus Akimboyewa, Almajiri on the streets is a major issue in the north. Why no child should end up on the streets? Sadly, millions are on the streets begging and trying to survive. Time all governments took action on this.
Okay, Udo. I don't think Almajiri culture is anything Islamic. We have Muslims outside Nigeria and they don't leave their children begging on the street or constituting nuisance to society. It is a reflection of bad leadership from family and state. Many of them are not Nigerians.
Okay, just to close, Saliu Tanko Yakosai in Kano. There's an issue here. I recall that Kiri and I were on the set once we were reviewing what the Kano state government was doing, and we said, look, it would be useful to have a database. But there are, again, practical challenges potentially arising from trying to maintain a credible database of the Almajiri. For instance, I mean, you keep having the influx because Kano is a magnet. So how is the Kano state government trying to manage the database and to be sure that indeed those who are on the database are Nigerians and not persons who are streaming from elsewhere in the country and then just dumping them on the state? Continent.
Well, like you rightly mentioned, it is indeed a Herculean task to be able to even gather the accurate data of these Almajiris that we have in Kano. So, and that is what precisely the state government is doing. They are getting the data, starting from the names, the local government they are from, whether from Kano or outside of the state, you know, their age and the name of the Sangaya school, the Alarama that they are staying with. Now, the essence of having this data is to be able to make sure that, because like we keep saying, talking about the sustainability, once the state government recognizes that particular Sangaya school and started giving its intervention to the school, then it will not be allowed for that any student from that school to be seen on the street begging. So that also extends to the issue of stopping others from coming in. So once a child is seen on the street begging and arrested, you know, you're going to ask him, where are you from? Which is your school? And he's able to say, okay, I'm from this school, and we realize that that school is part of the schools that we are taking care of, then there will be penalty for that Alarama. And if we realize that that Almajiri is not from any of our records, is not on the database, then that means there's need to be able to send him back to his parents in his own states. And this is where we need the support of everybody, like I keep saying. Kano State is a catalyst. We have already begun the process. His Excellency Dr. Umar Ganduje has set the ball rolling. There's momentum.
Yes, he has indeed set the ball rolling, and of course we believe that other state governments will key into that. We would like to appreciate all our guests this morning who made it possible for us to treat this matter, and Kingsley is also suggesting that we could have a second time around on this particular topic to be able to do justice to it. And first of all, let's appreciate Salihu Tanko Yakasai, special advisor to the governor of Kano State on media. It's been a pleasure listening to your analysis this morning. And of course, I would like to thank Mohammed Sabo Kiana, team lead, Almajiri Rights Initiative, who opened up several dimensions to this conversation. Thank you indeed. And Dr. Hamid Bobo, Executive Secretary, UBEC. It's been great sharing in your thoughts on this particular matter. Thank you for coming. All right, let's take you on sports.